All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to our Wednesday night webinar with NOCD. NOCD, a downloadable app you can get through Google Play or iOS. Please check us out. It's a free download, by the way. And if you're looking for teletherapy across the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, or Australia, we have that available as well. So check us out at nocd.com or hit that therapist button on the NOCD app. And we're also working with other conditions too, such as, say, hoarding and excoriation, trichotillomania, tics. And if you have a member of your family or a friend maybe who is not quite ready for prime time therapy and you want to get some education about OCD, we even have our NOCD 411 sessions as well too. We continuously get more and more coverage through NOCD through here in the US through all sorts of different insurances. So please check us out. Oh man, look, there's someone else here tonight. Hello, Wesley Banks. Welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are, and why you've suddenly appeared on my StreamYard. What's going on?
Yeah, sure. I'm a big fan, so that's why I'm here. I'm a big fan of NOCD. Obviously, next to my name, I'm a member. I've been a member for getting close to about a year now with Tiffany Merritt. She's a New York-based therapist. She's been awesome. Really helped me through the good times and the bad times, which we'll get into, the nature of the condition. But
Tiffany is awesome. I will second that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he's the best. Yeah. So a little bit about myself, just broadly, I'm a third-year medical student. I'm an aspiring emergency physician. That's ultimately where I'd like to be, working days and nights, and get into maybe a little bit of trauma, stuff like that. So we'll see where that takes me. And I recently married within the year, so that's been exciting. Really glad it's over, but really love that new journey. And I've been living with OCD for most of my childhood, my entire adult life, and I'm really glad that I found OCD and I got to be a part of it. And thank you for having me on this.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. Happy to have you joining us. And as always, we're going to go and jump into some of our Q&A here. And anywhere that there's times that you see, if you're scrolling through the questions there and you find one that just really kind of hits home for you, feel free to call it out and go ahead and work on that one. And then I will also work through some of these. And if I would find that, boy, a member's opinion would really be fascinating right here, I'm going to ask you about some of that as well too, and we'll kind of take it from there. Okay. So scroll through, everyone. If you have questions directly for Wesley as well too, as a member of NOCD, and not even just a member of NOCD, but as a person who is dealing with obsessive compulsive disorder and has gone through school and is continuing to work through a higher level of education and getting married, and the navigations of OCD and how it affects your social life, your personal life, your academic life, your work life. Those would be great questions as well too. And I think all fair game. Would you say, Wesley?
Yeah, I'm a big cards on the table kind of guy. So, I have no shame if anybody wants to ask away.
No shame away, everyone. No shame away. All right, here we go. So our first question is, have emotional contamination OCD, including blasphemous thoughts. However, with the idea that the thoughts are just thoughts, my compulsions have drastically decreased to non-existence. However, my obsessions have remained the same or more. Are they going to decrease? I would say that they would over time. You're just going to have to let that catch up. Remember this, OCD is hoping one day you'll slip and do another compulsion. So it's going to keep those obsessions strong for a bit in the hopes that one day you'll just say, oh, screw it, I'm just going to do one more compulsion. That'll feel great. Just like somebody who would quit drugs or alcohol, we'll talk about the fact that those cravings and urges are very, very strong, even though they're not using drugs or alcohol anymore. And of course, the addiction is always hoping, you could just go back and have one, probably. That would be fine, wouldn't it? It'd be okay. Why don't you just go back and have a little nip of something like that? How about for you, Wesley? How has that been in your work through OCD?
Yeah, so I think the main approach to the practice is ERP, and I think that when I think about obsessions getting better or getting worse, it's not linear. There's no straight line involved in, okay, I'm trending upwards and now I'm going to get to this place where I'm cured and everything is fine. This is something that I've signed up and signed on to for life. And, that's, I'm okay with it. Everybody has their things that are difficult, but I think it's important to recognize that progress is great, but don't let a setback define or hinder any of the work that you've been doing. I think it's important to maintain perspective and recognition of, the good moments when they're good, and, the bad ones sometimes can pop up more. And, this is a disorder where it'll make you doubt, am I doing the right thing? Are things getting better? It's a doubting disorder that makes me doubt that I have the disorder. That's a doubting disorder, and it feeds into a cycle. So, I think it's really important to take the good days, enjoy the good days. And when you think you're having a bad day or a bad stretch, just keep doing the work and keep using those exposures and the response prevention. It's really, it's a lifestyle, and you gotta maintain it the best you can.
Wesley, this won't shock you, I'm sure, but OCD is kind of like the turd in the punch bowl at the party, right? So it's a fly in the ointment.
Right.
Everybody who gets married has doubts.
Mm-hmm.
How did the doubting disorder play into the normal, quote unquote, I hate that word, so I'm putting in quotes, doubts that most people experience, and then to have that on steroids with OCD?
Sure. So, there's the specific theme with relationship OCD, and that's not necessarily something that I find myself. I have a spectrum or a spinning wheel of the themes, and they'll change for me, as fast as one hat goes on, the other one comes off, another one goes on. But as far as the marriage and the relationship stuff has gone, the day of my wedding, I had jitters and I was anxious. I woke up feeling that way. Leading up to it, you have a heightened sense of anxiety with OCD. It's definitely more compounded, more extreme. But I remember the day of, my father-in-law making a very benign joke when I said to him, "Hey man, so this is it, am I the right guy?" And he said to me, "Well, it's too late now." I knew he was kidding, but a part of me wanted to take that and say, what did he mean by that? Like, am I not good enough? My father-in-law doubt that I good enough for his daughter, or am I a good enough guy? Do I deserve this and that? And then on one of the biggest, if not the biggest day of my life so far, I had a moment, or a couple of moments, where I was like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? This is so stressful. But then you think about what's important, and the hardest part for me, the exposure, was the day of. My wedding is here. Mm-hmm. And the response and prevention of it is, I'm going to take one step down the aisle, and then I'm going to take another step down the aisle. And then when I get to the end of the aisle, I'll stand there next to my father, who married me, which was actually pretty cool. Mm-hmm. He got ordained on, something lifechurch.com, whatever. But, awesome. You find yourself in these pivotal moments in life. And I think the anticipation and the buildup is always, if not always, going to be worse than actually just putting yourself there and living with the feelings, because feelings can't kill you. They can make you feel, pretty bad. But, right. Fortunately, I've never come across a documented case of death by feeling. So, it was a lot to get through that moment. But once I was there and once I was in it, the things passed and the levels came down, and it was the best day of my life.
Thanks for sharing that, because I think people will benefit from that, because it could be a wedding, it could be a graduation, it could be a new job, whatever it is. Sure. There's always going to be big events that OCD is going to want to say, ooh, a stressor. Hey, let's jump in on that one and see what happens, right?
That's right.
Caitlin says, really struggling with the fear that I may not recover, or what if I have to feel this anxious forever? Was that ever a part of anything you struggled with, Wes?
It still is.
Okay. Tell us about it.
By no means am I a perfect specimen. I'm not here because I'm cured. It's more so, I'm working my way into better recovery. That's the approach. The maybe not, for Caitlin is, maybe I will never get better. Maybe this is my baseline forever. And that's the maybe, that's the what if, that's the scary, that's the, the rub in the situation. But I think it's just important to remember that, things will get better if you put in the work and you put in the time. Therapy at NOCD was definitely a huge thing for me. The best available research will often say that therapy and medications in tandem. A lot of people are afraid of, the medications and stuff like that. But, it takes practice and it takes time. And I know that at the very, very rock bottom, at that, moment of despair, it can seem tough, but I promise you things get better if you work at it and if you try. And they get better. You take a step back, you take 2 steps forward, and life rolls on.
Mm-hmm. All right. Delia says, Dr. McGrath, I have just a quick question about moving past obsessions without giving them too much attention. This is tied into a feeling that you have to prove to yourself every time that the obsession will dissipate eventually. Also, what does it indicate when certain obsessions rotate and pop up from time to time? Doesn't mean I haven't embraced uncertainty and dropped the fight in those areas yet. For example, somatic obsession centering around blinking or a certain word or hyperfixation on a certain existential tend to be staples of my OCD. I think OCD does like to crackerjack or popcorn itself around once in a while and say, oh, hey, what about this? Or what about this? Right. And my concern would be this: anyone with OCD who would have one of those things pop back up again and then start to worry, oh my gosh, what if that's a problem now, is probably doing exactly what OCD wants you to do. So here's something just for everyone to know. You don't have to have OCD to have things pop up in your life once in a while that you would rather not remember, right? It's a natural, normal kind of experience to have things just pop into your head. And just in my saying that, I was just blasted with about 4 things that I would rather not remember happening in my life, and they just jumped right in, right? So I'm not going to do any rituals about them or anything. It's not necessary. I can allow for those things that maybe I'm not so proud of or wish hadn't occurred to be there, and they're going to dissipate as I continue to talk with all of you and with Wesley today. I would not take a look at this as meaning you haven't embraced uncertainty, that you've dropped the fight in those areas. I would look at it as OCD doesn't want to go away and is going to go back to sometimes the tried and true things that it knows can hook you, right, in order to kind of bring you back into the OCD fold. And your job is, of course, to not allow that to happen, right? So love to hear your take on any of those things too, Wesley. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, of course. I think when I first started with all of these things, and when I first started to recognize OCD and what it is and learn about it, I think you have to really take a self-compassionate approach. I think you have to allow yourself those small setbacks, and you have to tell yourself, oh, this is terrible. My themes are switching. What if my themes get worse? And you have the what ifs and the shoulds and all that. But I think it's important to, if you get caught up with blinking, then, blink, just blink. If you have a scary thought, have a scary thought. Allow yourself that it's not an injustice. It's just, as Dr. McGrath just said, it's like you said, you get those thoughts, they come in, they dissipate, they go away, but in OCD, they hang around. Or in OCD, they hang around.
Yeah, hopefully not in OCD. But
no, not in OCD. OCD doesn't ignore hanging around. In OCD, they hang around, and you have to allow yourself to say, I can get through this for one more day. There's great workbooks on self-compassion, and I think building that safe space with myself and allowing myself to have OCD in my relationship, in medicine, in my life has been really helpful for me, and to have a more positive internal dialogue at those really tough moments. So I think that would be my best advice in this particular case. Just blink, have the thoughts. That's okay.
Yeah. For Trisha, check out with us. Trisha, just feel free to hit that therapist button on the app and talk to our care team. Let's see what happens. Zanelli, which I never know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I'm going to go with it. Let's see. Did I miss one? No, I didn't skip anybody. Okay. Advice. I have been doing ERP for harm OCD. I notice that I don't react too anxious or have physical reactions like stomach aches or headaches. Now that I don't feel anxious as before, that makes me worry. Oh, the standard, now that I don't feel bad about it, does that mean that I like it kind of question I'm going to predict is coming here. Wesley, we'll talk about how that worked with you. But Zanilli continues on, because when I felt anxious before, I knew I didn't like those thoughts. Now I question whether I like my thoughts or not. How do you deal with that during recovery?
Harm OCD is something that I do have a bit of experience in. It is tough to, I won't delve into the specific thoughts. There's really no reason to. It's, it's everyone has their own mountains to climb. But I think, learning to accept and embrace that thoughts are just thoughts. Everybody, normal or not, OCD or not, has these thoughts. My wife the other day was telling me, she was like, what if I was driving down the street and I just like pulled onto the sidewalk and there was a kid walking by? And I said to her, well, that's a pretty scary thought, but did you do it? No. Did you move on with your day? Yeah. Nothing happened. It was just a thought. It was just, an image. So to get back to the point of liking the thoughts, I don't think I think that's the OCD really, really creeping in and trying to ramp up and re-groove, that kind of a scary thing to keep itself alive. Like, what if I like the thoughts? What if I go down this? And what if I start to want to do these things and get the urges? Then, I think that's what that sounds like to me.
Yeah. There's almost this notion that unless I hate a thought, I like it. Right?
Yeah, no, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
I think that's where OCD really, really tries to trick people.
Right.
You must really hate or dislike this thought, because if you don't, what if it then meant that it didn't bother you anymore? Yeah. And what kind of person would you be who, if you had this thought, wouldn't be bothered by it?
That's right. That's right.
And I'd say, well, maybe it'd be like me, who takes on the thoughts of all the people who I've worked with and lives with them all the time. Wesley, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I guarantee, Wesley, if you and I were on a staircase right now, I would think about throwing you down the stairs, because I've treated so many people who have been afraid of what if I were to throw somebody down the stairs, that I've now incorporated that into my own life. And now I can't be on a staircase without contemplating throwing everybody on the stairs that I'm on the stairs on. And I also have zero fear or disgust of that thought whatsoever, because to me, that's all that it is. It's just a weird, intrusive thought that pops into my head and needs no attention paid to it whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I think, living with that, it's either black or white, or it's either yin or yang perspective. There's a whole area of gray. It doesn't have to be I love or I hate the thought. It could just be I'm indifferent about the thought, or, in some cases, maybe, wouldn't be so terrible, So you can throw it down the stairs anytime mentally. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm doing it right now, actually, just so you know.
There you go. Love it.
Caitlin says, how do you deal with what I think is an urge to know right now if I need to go inpatient for my OCD? Well, one thing I'll say, Caitlin, is any thought or image or urge that OCD demands will never get an answer. Wesley, how many of your OCD thoughts, image, or urges did you finally answer to a satisfaction of your obsessive compulsive disorder?
Not so many.
Yeah. Zero, maybe, right?
Perhaps zero.
Perhaps zero. Yeah. So, Caitlin, here's the deal. Your OCD says to you, you need to go inpatient, but tells you need to find proof to make sure that isn't what you need. You're never going to find that proof, Caitlin, because, of course, OCD only loves a worst case scenario and doesn't give a crap about anything else other than that. So anything that you present to the altar of OCD saying, hey, OCD, guess what? Here's a reason I don't need to go inpatient. It goes, rejected. Nope. Does not compute. Not good enough. And is there thrown on the floor. Must have more reasons. It doesn't ever get to a point where you're going to think, oh yeah, I don't need to go to inpatient. That's what OCD is going to throw at you. So it isn't about answering this question, Caitlin. It's about recognizing that this is an OCD question, which is unanswerable. And therefore you don't even need to pay attention to it, much less anything else. It requires absolute zero of your time whatsoever.
Yeah, if I may add to that also, I think one of my biggest fears at one time was, what if I'm losing it? And what if I'm losing my mind and I'm going to end up being committed to an inpatient facility? And what if, they can't take care of me? And you watch movies like, what is it? Jack Nicholson, right? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right?
Yeah,
With
sure.
Ratchet. You see these facilities and you're like, oh, what if I end up like one of these people? And,
Yep.
it's sad and it's tough, but, it's like you were saying, those thoughts and those fears never really dissipate. There's really no satisfactory answer. I didn't watch the movie 1,000 times and then say, okay, you know what, this is the 1,000th time that I can move on now. I feel fine. It just kind of fell into the background and moved on. And I think it's like you were saying, you kind of live with it and you work through it.
Yeah. A reminder to everyone, you're listening to our Wednesday night webinar brought to you by NOCD. NOCD, a downloadable app you can get through Google Play or iOS. Please check us out. And you can also go to nocd.com if you're looking for teletherapy for obsessive compulsive disorder. And with me tonight, Wesley Banks. Welcome, Wesley. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We already answered one that was from Nicole that said, "Are OCD and fear of commitment of getting married?" Because I, without even knowing it, asked you that question earlier. So I think we were prescient on that one. That was good. Natural B says, how to handle when you feel like you actually want the content of your thoughts as you get better. Another OCD trick that tries to get you to lure in to go back and do a compulsion. OCD will say, oh, not bothering you anymore. Maybe that means you really want it then. Maybe that's what that is. And I think that goes with the answer that we just gave a few questions earlier as well, too, of that notion that unless you hate it, you must love it is the motto of OCD.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Chloe says, is it true that without trying to solve your obsession clarify and better insight will come naturally? Sorry, a little wording issue on there, but I think we're kind of getting to the notion that will you develop some clarity and will that just come naturally if you don't spend time trying to solve everything?
Insight is a tough one. Insight is something that at least for myself, I've found some days I wake up and I'm like, yeah, sure, I have OCD. And then other days I'm like, do I have OCD? Is something else going on? Are these thoughts projections? Are they urges? Are they feelings? And then it compounds and snowballs. I think insight is something that's difficult to quantify. But, I think the part that makes OCD so tough is you take these strong feelings and these strong urges, but we maintain our lucidity, and that's what drives the anxiety, and that's what drives the extreme fears. And I think clarity and better insight, it's almost like a catch-22, because wanting that better clarity and that better insight and chasing these obsessions might lead you into more compulsions. So I think it's important to try to find that balance. Do you know what I mean by that?
I'm always worried even though Chloe put not certainty in parentheses here, that they just want to clarify anything. I don't honestly know that there's much of a difference. OCD may parse out words to say, oh no, you don't need to have certainty, but we must clarify. Mm-hmm. Well, it's just another thing for OCD to be like, that have we clarified this butter enough, or is there still a little bit of milk solids in there? And maybe one more round of clarification before we draw the lobster butter out. And, just can you ever get enough clarity then becomes just another question. You can't, right? OCD is insatiable, and therefore you'll never get it. So if you want to replace the word certainty with clarifying, you're still not going to be able to get to enough clarity that you're going to think that it's okay, that it's great.
That's right. And
it's just not going to happen.
Tiffany, also shout out to Tiffany, my fantastic therapist. She says that when she works with kids, but it's something that's also stuck with me. The idea is that there's the OCD monster, and you have to starve it. You can't keep feeding it because it'll never stop eating. So in this particular case, feeding clarity, it'll never be enough. You can keep feeding it and it'll just keep growing. So,
yeah. Right. Nicole says, good exposures for not knowing if you love your partner enough to get married. Well, we got a marriage kick going on tonight, it appears, on things. Yeah.
I got the ring, so.
You did it, right?
I did it. Still married.
Wesley, could I have ever convinced you that you loved your partner enough?
No. No, I think there's always, there's always a feeling of, what if there was somebody else? You question. We're supposed to have the one soulmate, and what if she fell shy by just one hair? So there's no way. No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this has come up a few times too. I think that no matter how good things might be going in our relationship, I would never be I would be remiss if I didn't say there's always ghosts of former relationships that are going to stick around there. And all your partner needs to do is one thing that annoys you, and you'd be like, the other person would have never done that, I bet, or something like that, right? And it's just like,
Right. And sometimes those ghosts know your wife's Instagram handle, and
oh, geez, even worse.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, but no. To get back to the purpose, no, there's always more love to give. So.
Cricket says, how do you get over intrusive thoughts that make you panic? Oh, I've got some answers there. I've been having them about everyone I look at. I haven't told my therapist because I'm too scared to. Any help appreciated. Well, Cricket, first of all, you got to tell your therapist, right? And if you don't trust the therapist to talk to them, I would find a different therapist that you can develop that trusting enough relationship where you can tell them everything. I mean, Wesley, I would think you and Tiffany are pretty darn open with each other, right, about things, and you have to be, right?
You're correct, and that took time. It took time. It took trust.
Yep. But in terms of panic, the great piece of this is here's another OCD trick, right? The trickery of OCD as we continue through here tonight is if you don't do the compulsion, you'll have a panic attack. And if you have a panic attack, it could kill you and you could die, and that would be awful and horrible. So in order to prevent the panic attack and potential death from happening, why don't you just do the compulsion and all will be well? And guess what? You do it, and then you don't have the panic attack, and then you think, oh, wow, doing these compulsions not only stops bad, awful things from happening about obsessions, but it also stops panic attacks as well, too. I better continue to do everything that OCD wants me to do. So, Cricket, there is a great treatment for panic. It's called interoceptive exposure. We do this all the time with people who have panic issues. And I would purposely expose you to all of the different kinds of panic sensations that you experience to teach you that you can handle panic attacks. You don't need to be afraid of them. You don't need to be afraid of things like muscle tension or hyperventilation or dizziness or feeling faint or feeling dissociated or hot or cold sensations, or those types of things aren't actually dangerous. No one's died of a panic attack ever in the history of the world, as far as we are aware of. And therefore, let's face that panic attack head on and show ourselves, OCD, you're going to throw what if I have a panic attack in front of me? Well, guess what? Not going to be afraid of it. Take that. And then you move on.
Yeah. Yeah. I am a panic attack something of an expert from having him.
Oh, well, tell us all about it.
Sure. So sometimes there's a little bit of an aura, or sometimes I can feel it when it's coming, and those are the ones that aren't as bad. Sometimes I catch myself in these feelings that I've since practiced being in. I had a similar experience with a great previous therapist who would try to induce these panic attacks so I could learn, what they feel like, and then, work my way out of them. Or the sneaky ones where you don't realize they're happening until it's too late. And I think for me, the worst part is the feeling of impending doom, like the convincing feeling that I'm dying. This is it. Something's wrong. It's my heart. It's my this. It's my that. It's whatever. I think those are the ones that are the hardest to work through. And I think, it started with needing a support system. And the first time I had a panic attack, I went to the hospital. Actually, it's pretty common. Even what I've seen in the ER, a lot of people come in, they don't know what it is.
Say, as an ER doc, you're going to see a lot of panic attacks, right?
I get it all the time, and I sympathize greatly. And I sympathize for all those who have panic attacks as well. But I can promise you that no panic attack large enough will kill you. It won't start a series or a chain reaction of anything. And if you can start to learn and recognize what they are for you and what they feel like for you, and if you can't work your way out of it, just ride it out. Catch yourself in the moment, understand that you're having a panic attack. And if you can't, at least understand at some point it'll get better. And a lot of times when people have panic attacks, myself included, I feel much better. So sometimes, I wake up and I'll say, yeah, maybe I should have a panic attack today, and I'll feel way better tomorrow. So that's
a new one, but sure.
That's it. Yeah. But,
how many people in the ER, when you tell them it's a panic attack, are shocked?
Half of them don't believe me, and they say I want another EKG. And I start to think, well, this, maybe you need some services from a little thing called NOCD. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, people are surprised, and then I have to explain to them the other common signs of chest pain, fist on the chest, and tell them, well, it's not a heart attack. This is what a heart attack would look and feel like. What you're experiencing is a panic attack, and then sometimes it's a little medication, or sometimes it's reassurance, and then they feel so much better. So I find it quite often. I found a great question when I scrolled down that I'd actually like to address. If you
of course, go right ahead, read it off.
Steve, I'm sorry for the pronunciation. Steve,
you don't have to worry about the last name. We just do first names anyway.
Okay, so. All right. Steve said glutamate versus SSRI meds for OCD. What's best? I think that is a very interesting question, and I think that it's important to acknowledge that medications are best managed by the people that have experience in prescribing medications, right? Like psychiatric NPs, psychiatrists. I think if you have questions about medications, even some primary care physicians have psychiatric training. I think when it comes to which medication works best, I think it's the same thing with therapy. You have to have a little bit of faith and a little bit of trust in the provider to help you find what's best for you. And there's absolutely a dialogue there, but I think to ask to decide which medication would be better is really not, it's not the best case scenario. It's going to be whatever works best for you. And sometimes that's trial and error, and sometimes it's other stuff like that. What do you think about that?
There's a couple of ways to go about it. I mean, most of the time you're going to see people starting with the SSRI medications. That's going to be pretty typical. We know that some of the best meds for OCD probably lean more on the tricyclic sides, but have more side effects, and therefore they're not the first line of drugs for a lot of people, because if they can get the effects that they want out of the SRIs or the SNRIs, that's going to be great. Glutamates, people can do add-ons, and unfortunately there's some trial and error in medications, and that's also why there's some companies now that are doing some genetic testing with people as well too, to kind of give some ideas about what meds might actually be the best meds for you, depending on your genetic profile as well too. So there's lots of stuff out there where people are trying to figure this out and make it more of a ability to choose right the first time, I think, instead of having to do some of the trial and error that sometimes comes with this.
Sure. And I think there's even, there's a lot of research being done on the use of antipsychotics, first generation, second generation. And I think it's such a dirty word, when someone thinks, oh, if I take an antipsychotic, that must mean I have psychosis and I'm insane. And quite honestly, if they called it what it is, a dopamine receptor blocker, would anybody be afraid of it? No. If they called cars driving metal death traps, would people want to drive cars every day? No, absolutely not.
No.
Called cars. So, I think, to limit yourself, based on that. Obviously, therapy is going to be the first line treatment in a lot of literature and a lot of opinions. But, if you have to, try medications, don't limit yourself to what the recommendations would be, and take them as prescribed.
Rebecca says, ADHD and OCD is hard. How do I remember? And then it got cut off. So I don't know if there was something else supposed to be there. It can be difficult. It can be difficult even to differentiate the two. I think there's a lot of people who are diagnosed with ADHD who have OCD who aren't paying attention to things because there's obsessions and maybe even mental compulsions that are going on. And therefore they're so focused on those that they look like ADHD because they're not paying attention in school or something of that nature. And you also have to kind of be careful on the medication side too, because meds for ADHD, which are purposely stimulants because they actually play a role in calming you down. It's this weird reset effect that happens when you overstimulate a certain thing. It can actually hit a reset button and then be calm. And that's how those meds work, right, Wesley? Am I correct in that?
Yeah. You are correct.
But those meds also could increase OCD potentially because they can be more of a stimulant to OCD and not have a reset with that. So it's important really to make sure that you're in conjunction with a therapist. And if you are on any medications, also there's a release to the provider of the medications as well too. And the two are really coordinating their care together.
Absolutely. My therapist has spoken with my psychiatrist many times, and I have no shame in the medicine game. So if there's anybody else out there that feels like it's taboo or anything, I'm still going to be a doctor and I'm still going to do what I got to do. So,
Delius asked if I was going to buy a Powerball ticket. I did actually. So just so you know, the jackpot is getting up there. Yes. And it would be wonderful, but guess what? I think I'll still do these. Even if I win the $1.2 billion, I'll still do these webinars because they're just fun. Why would I give up something that's fun and enjoyable, right? No.
Just do it from a private island.
Yeah. I could be, underneath a palm tree somewhere, but yeah, definitely.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah. So, Justin says, what should I do if I can't figure out or remember something and it causes anxiety? Thank you. Justin, I have forgotten more things in my life than I remember. I cannot tell you probably every single day of 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th grade, at least, that just to start there. I can't remember everything from every one of those days that I was in school. And therefore, Justin, I'm wondering, what should I feel anxious about from those days? This could be related to the notion of real event OCD, that if I can't remember something, then what if it means that I did something awful and horrible and now I don't remember it, but I'm responsible for it and I should pay for it? There can even be a morally scrupulous kind of experience that comes along that as well too, with the notion being that I am a bad person if I've done bad things. And if I don't remember doing bad things, that doesn't absolve me of having done bad things. And I should still have to pay for the bad things that I've done.
So I have two questions that I see that are asking me directly. Rebecca asks, Wesley, do you have any experience with POCD? If so, can you share a bit? I don't have any particular experience with POCD. I can remember when I first had more recognition with OCD. I remember being afraid of, what if, how am I going to be a father someday? How am I gonna handle the responsibilities? What if I my hand slips and I touch my future son or daughter inappropriately? And I think, like any other theme, I think even though it might feel a little more taboo and a little more dirty, I think you have to share with your therapist, these feelings and these thoughts, and I don't think it makes you any worse of a person. I think it also goes along with the what if we start to consume our own content, message we were talking about before. POCD is no different than any other faction of OCD. It might feel dirty, it might feel wrong, but it's we're here for you. So,
Wesley, one thing I've learned, I'd love to hear your opinion on this too, in working with OCD, is everyone has a universal statement to me, which is, why couldn't I have any other kind of OCD but this one?
That, yes, I've fallen into that category before, and I've used it on more than one. The grass is always greener, and
no matter what it is, the grass is always greener. Yep,
it's always going to be greener. And whether your theme is POCD, it could change. Careful what you wish for. That's the other statement. But OCD is OCD, and the approach and the treatment, the gold standard is ERP, and it's still the same. So my advice would be to just work on that, work through it, and don't hinge so much on the content, but focus more on your own values and your own personal strengths. And that's something that can be not to block the thoughts or go into that realm, but keep fighting the good fight. I believe in you. I also have one more question that was asked by name. Captain Cass, I have a question for Wesley. Any tips for working with patients in a medical field with OCD doubts, fear of accidental harm, checking, etc.? I struggle with working a lot and would love tips. LOL. I used to be a vaccinator during the height of the pandemic. Medical students were recruited and paid Well, paid anything is paid handsomely when you're a medical student, but we were being
Yeah,
paid.
here's a slice of pizza. Woohoo! Yeah.
Oh, man, if you have pizza, the whole class will show up. No,
Yeah.
especially in New York, the New York pizza is unbelievable. But when I was a vaccinator,
whatever. Yeah, you go right ahead.
yeah, Coach Tik, he's the coach for the Bears. Yeah, that's all right. Justin Fields, man, we'll see how he does. Anyway, I'm a Jets fan. We'll touch on that another time. So to get back to the question, yes, in medicine, I think about it constantly, and it doesn't have to be in medicine. It could be in anything. I've heard of a colleague who also has OCD. She used to work in a deli, and she would always think, what if I just gave this young child tainted meat? What if
Great. Yeah.
What if I am installing the brake pads on this car and the brake pads fail? Am I responsible for that? So it doesn't have to be only in medicine. But when I was a vaccinator, I would think to myself all the time, what if I give somebody an injection in the incorrect placement? And what if I give them bursitis? Or what if I, that's when I first noticed, what if I this, what if I that? And, the reality of life is that things will happen, and worrying about them or panicking is the ceiling going to fall on my head? It's not going to prevent it with any more certainty than what would actually be the outcome. So have I worried about giving somebody a vaccine in the wrong place and giving them some sort of a misreaction? Have I worried about intubating somebody in the ER and thought, oh, what if I paralyze their vocal cords forever? Yes, I've thought about these things, but also you have to think that you have a job to do and you have a duty to live. And, I don't do these things intentionally. And if there are side effects or byproducts, I obviously feel bad about it. I'm still human, but no, it's important to recognize that, when you have a job to do, or when you work in medicine, or when you serve food or anything, you do the best you can to maintain the high standards, and, you move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. None of us have a guarantee. I mean, I have no guarantee that when I am done with this webinar and I walk up the stairs to go upstairs that I won't trip, fall, and go backwards down the stairs, crack my head open, and die. I mean, it could happen.
Good.
It is a possibility. So OCD, of course, says possibility equals probability, which means possibility equals 100%. But just because it says that doesn't make it true, right?
Right.
And there's, again, maybe one of the rubs that we see with OCD. Oh, well, OCD said it. So, I mean, it seems to be a pretty legitimate know-it-all of all things. And so therefore, why wouldn't what it said be absolutely true or real? I think I should probably listen to it in the off chance that it is 100% correct and right. But that sounds crappy, doesn't it? No one wants to do that.
Doesn't sound great.
No. Let's see. The great Heisenberger says, I cringe immensely over my intrusive thoughts that I look like I'm in pain. It's more like an instinct. What do I do? I'd want to keep exposing you to things that are intrusive thoughts with you until you get to a point that you have no reaction to them whatsoever. I'm reminded of working once with someone who had social anxiety, who was relentlessly teased by 5 older brothers. And so he had all these words that were just, again, cringy to him. He'd hear them and he would just be like, oh, and every time he heard one of them, whatever they called them. So we got a list of all those things. We made a recording of them, all of my colleagues, and I had them listen to it. And after 2 hours, he was finally not cringing so much. After 3 hours, he was pretty neutral. After 4 hours, he told me he was bored. And I said, great, listen to it for another hour. And after 5 hours, he was laughing at it, saying, I can't believe these stupid words have ruined my life for so long. They're dumb, and I hate them, and I don't give a crap anymore. And I said, awesome. Now you can stop listening to the tape. It was great. He needed 5 hours of just every minute hearing those words over and over again till they got to the point that it just no longer bothered him anymore. They didn't mean anything to him anymore. He couldn't, work out the reactions to him anymore or anything. He was just so inundated with them that they just became background noise. And that's where they stayed after that too.
Yeah, I think, listen to the words and just cringe, man. Let it happen. It'll happen less and less. It's like you were saying, the habituation will come in time.
Nothing wrong with a little cringe once in a while. So,
I'm going to cringe when I watch the replay of this, because I'm going to hate the sound of my voice and think, I couldn't get a haircut before and all that, whatever.
Yeah. Are you one of those people who does not like the sound of your voice?
I am, and my wife also cannot stand listening to videos of herself. So it's
Hmm.
it's adorable. We take a lot of memory videos, but we don't often watch them. So
My wife was the same. She hated listening to her voice. She did not like her voice.
yeah,
And then she laughed at me because I would go and listen to my recordings and
yeah.
I would critique myself and everything. Just, oh yeah, that was a good answer. Or okay, next time I'm going to say this. But she would just laugh that she'd hear me listening to myself a lot. Like, you really like to listen to yourself, don't you? It's like, well, I think I've got a pretty awesome radio voice there. So yeah, you know,
There
why
you go.
not?
It's not bad. Not bad.
4 years of a DJ, it worked out pretty well. Yeah, so.
That's what,
Matt says, what are the best ERPs for suicidal OCD? On my third week of ERP, and the sessions and exercises are hard, but I've had a few days of relief, but then there is some back and forth. Well, Matt, keep doing what you're doing. Then if you're on your third week and you're already seeing that kind of improvement, don't stop, right? Just keep working through that. That is fantastic. And make sure, again, you're working up that hierarchy. You're working with your therapist to build up to things. We're not here to throw you in the deep end of the pool to sink or swim. We want you to build up to stuff. I'm almost wary of telling you some things to do because I wouldn't want you to jump into doing some of those things if you're not ready for it. But if you've got an OCD therapist, have them reach out. I'm happy to review what your hierarchy looks like with them, just to make sure that we're covering all the bases. But all the best to you as you work through that.
it took me 2 months to drink coffee again at some point. So that you're doing great, buddy.
And what was the issue around coffee for you?
I had fears about caffeine and stimulants. When I find myself in a hard reset, or when I find myself going back to the basics, food is something I can really control.
Okay.
And establishing that locus of control is easy for me. And I won't eat certain things. I won't eat like foods that I think might be contaminated, or foods that, or drinks that, have caffeine and things like that. So I had to get back to the point where I could drink not coffee but matcha lattes. I'm a matcha latte guy. They hit me right here in the heart. But it took me a really long time to get back to the point where I was comfortable enough to drink even a small matcha latte, because I thought, what if the caffeine makes my heart race and it makes the OCD worse? And then and from there. So for 3 weeks of that kind of progress, it's really great. So don't recognize it's not just the big things. The little things can be small victories also. So once I started drinking my matchas again, I took a step from there, and it's like you said, it's a stepwise approach. So
awesome.
Only do the things you're ready for.
Great advice. Great advice. Captain Cass says also, do y'all have tips for reducing tic-like compulsions that are reaction to thoughts but hard to stop in time? Yeah, there's Charlie Mansueto's article on Tourettic OCD, where maybe some of the compulsions do have a tic-like experience as well too, and there's this kind of crossover, and so you might want to use some habit reversal training as well too if we're dealing with some tic-like behavior as well. Luckily, NOCD treats that as well too. So if you have this, we can do kind of a combination of ERP and some of the habit reversal work as well.
If I may, when I was a kid, I had a lot of tics. We used to call them my habits. And as a kid in the 90s, OCD wasn't really as well understood. And I think there's done a lot of work recently to really up that platform. When I was a kid, they thought maybe I had Tourette's. They thought maybe I needed an MRI and all these things. But I had these tics and these twitches and these motor responses to this extreme anxiety. Because kids can be wound up and anxious, and it was tough. Sometimes in school I'd be self-conscious about these things, and I still have them. Sometimes it's whether it's clearing my throat or figuring out what I'm doing with my eyebrows, or sometimes my head will rock back, and it'll change the way that my themes will change, but the habit still remains, and sometimes it can feel like it's embarrassing or what have you, but I think it's important to get therapy and to get therapist assistance. I think the biggest thing is recognizing what you do and then not trying to completely block it out, but try to put that space and that time in between each one. And if I can go 1 second without doing one, then I can go 5 seconds. Then maybe I can go 10 seconds. And then before you know it, you're going like an hour, and you're like, oh, okay, I just realized I haven't cleared my throat in an hour. So, sometimes it's as simple as that approach.
Awesome. Let's see. Serena says, needing to leave a marriage again, and being so afraid to do it, I keep getting sick, but I'm sick the longer I stay. Hard to know where OCD comes into that. Is it just more on the decision making because OCD hates a decision but tells you have to make one as well too? So, Serena, I would definitely work that out with a therapist too, so they can kind of work on unpacking that one with you. Totally. Sleepy says, hey guys, what do you do when you feel like classic ERP scripting isn't working for you? Well, I Sleepy, I mean, I would say you've got to take a look at a couple of things. Number one, is the ERP being done in the right way, right? I mean, just because somebody might be saying they're doing classic ERP and scripting doesn't actually mean that they're doing it, right? So I would always check, kind of maybe bounce it off somebody else who does ERP and see, all right, here's what my therapist is having me doing. Is this what seems standard? What would happen? It could be, it could not be. So I don't want to judge right off the bat saying that classic ERP isn't working without having maybe another check on that one as well too, just to be sure. But if we're finding that ERP isn't being helpful, sometimes, a combination with some medication could be the thing that moves the ladder a little bit as well too. And sometimes there might be some other disorders or things that are getting in the way. Depression could get in the way of people doing some of their ERP work. Maybe there's some trauma there, and the reason that they're not doing exposures is because it's a trigger for trauma, so they're avoiding it. So there's a lot of things to investigate to see exactly what might be getting in the way of the ERP working. Let's see. Sarah says, newly diagnosed OCD. What is ERP? I'm nervous about my first appointment on Friday. Well, Wesley, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, it's natural to be nervous. I was nervous before we started doing this, but like all things, the nervousness has since passed and I've gotten more comfortable. I think the first thing to expect is when you start any sessions with any provider or any new relationship, professionally or personal, it takes time to build up. And then when you think about ERP, it stands for exposure and response prevention. So the premises being the exposure is what leads to the obsessions or the compulsions and the want or the urge to satisfy these feelings. And response prevention is, to paraphrase, I can sit with these feelings and I can refocus my attention to things that are based on my own values. And this is something that took me, the exposure part, I have a very high threshold for, but the response prevention, I still work on it constantly, every day, all the time, always. As long as I have OCD, I will practice response prevention for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And Tiffany's been, doing a great job with each session working on that. And exposures don't have to be as extreme as somebody who's a seasoned veteran who's, licking the bottom of their shoe because they have fear of contamination OCD. Yeah, you can start slow. For me, believe it or not, my hardest thing is to sit with myself and my own thoughts for 10 minutes and just let myself ruminate it up. Like just let the mind run wild and just be okay with that. And that's, it sounds like a simple and silly thing, but that's quite often what I'm doing in my own sessions is just learning how to be on my own and in my own thoughts. So don't be afraid. Don't be nervous. The therapist is a trained professional. They're going to do a great job and they're going to help you out.
Heisenberger again says, I feel so tired of doing the same compulsions and saying how it will be okay. What do I do to get better? I can't get to therapy at the moment. I never ask people to say it will be okay. Just so you know. So right off the bat, there would be my critique. My goal isn't to get people to feel okay. It's to get people to recognize I can handle this. I may not like it. It may not be comfortable, but I can handle it. But to me, that's fundamentally different than everything's going to be fine or okay, because that goes into a safety-seeking behavior of reassurance if you're going to try to hear that everything's fine or okay. And there's no way for any of us to ever truly feel if everything's going to be fine or okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, that goes back to also the self-compassion thing. If you can tell yourself, I can go one more day and practice one more time and just get through one more thing and then move on to the next one. That's, there is no way to have certainty in knowing that everything's going to be okay. So.
Oh, here we go. Having a hard time waiting for medical test results. OCD telling me the worst outcome will happen. I'm going to bet OCD's always told you the worst outcome will happen. So how many other times was it correct when it told you that? WAD 199. Was it correct every single time? Was it correct 90% of the time? Maybe 0.00001% of the time? What is it going to be? Now and then there's going to be a coincidence, right? Now and then OCD is going to tell you something and something might happen, right? You might actually get a worst case scenario kind of thing. It's going to occur once in a while, but just because it doesn't mean that the OCD has any predictive powers or anything, because OCD is always betting on the worst case scenario. And just by chance, if you go through an entire life, you're going to get some news sometimes that you don't like, and OCD is going to go, ha, winner, chicken dinner. There we go. I told you. I knew that was coming. See, I predicted. And we forget about all the other times that OCD predicted that and it didn't happen. And we just say, oh, well, it was just luck. It's just luck. But this time, look, OCD got it right. And I knew OCD was a good thing and predictive. And look at how it worked. Let's see. Can you speak to agoraphobia and OCD and how to tell which is which? So agoraphobia would be avoidance of places where you might fear having a panic attack or panic-like sensations. And it typically involves things like being away from home, being in open spaces, taking public transportation, something of those kinds of nature. There's a few different areas that are specifically listed in the diagnostic manual. And it doesn't really involve any kind of compulsions or rituals, other than avoidance of, as long as I avoid those things, I won't have a panic attack, is kind of what it is. Versus an active compulsion, a behavioral or mental act that somebody does to attempt to neutralize something and think that that's going to prevent that thing from actually happening. And it would be beyond panic. So if it's limited to panic, it could be agoraphobia or panic disorder. But if it's going beyond that, then you're looking at other things, maybe obsessive compulsive disorder being that thing that's going on. Maybe you've dealt with this one, Wesley. What if my OCD keeps telling me the reason I've been able to avoid bad things in life is because of my compulsive checking?
Yes. Checking, rechecking, check again and again and again, and you'll still find yourself with the same unquenched thirst or satisfaction. Checking is one of the classic, Hollywood portrayals of OCD, and I think, the exposure and actually more importantly, the response prevention is, I'm not going to check this time. I'm going to pick something small. I'm not going to check if my shoelaces are untied, or I'm not going to check if the stove is off because I am pretty sure I turned off the stove. I think checking is an easy compulsion to feed, and it's an easy loop to fall into. And I think it's harder than most people would think to stop. And, it's something to definitely work on and be aware of, do the best you can to fight that urge.
Right.
You can do it.
Well, as shocking as it is, that was an hour. That flew by really fast. So want to thank everyone for joining us tonight on our Wednesday night webinar. Wesley, thank you. And as always, I love to give our guest a chance to say a few words before we go. So hit it.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Really appreciate the time. Really appreciate being here. It was awesome for me to be able to help out. Like I said in the beginning of the show, for those of you joining late, I'm not perfect. I'm still working on these things myself. I have good days. I have bad days. I have great days. But, every day is another day to keep working on my OCD and practice my exposures. So keep up with your therapist, be honest with them, and keep going.
Wesley, it was great to have you here tonight, and thanks to your awesome therapist, Tiffany, as well, too, for suggesting you join us. So we really appreciate it. If anybody else is ever interested in being a guest on the show, let us know. But once again, brought to you here tonight by NOCD. Thanks for joining us. NOCD teletherapy available in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK. Check us out at nocd.com. We'll see you again next week, everyone. And one just little piece of advice that I like to say to everybody. work on being nicer to yourself than your OCD is, and see what it's like when that happens. Because I think you'll find you kind of like yourself a little bit better that way. So take care, everyone. And Wesley, hang tight. Don't go anywhere yet. I'm taking you out of the stream, but hang tight.
You got it.